But wanted to go over a little bit about Executech. I don't know how many of you are familiar with us, but thought we'd take a minute here and just review who Executech is. We're a company that's been in business since 1999. We've grown quite a bit over the years through organic growth as well as through acquisition. And, currently have offices throughout the Western United States. And then we have sister companies that are owned by the same group that owns us, mostly in the Midwest and East and South. But it gives us quite a wide coverage to take care of any on-site needs that people have. Whereas we do a lot of our business remotely, a lot of IT can be done remotely. So we have clients all over the United States and even internationally. So it gives us quite a team to work with everyone. So these are the core things that we do as a company. We're primarily focused on managed IT services and cybersecurity and then cloud. And we actually have 3 different practices. So initially when we started out, we kind of did everything, but as we've grown, we've decided that it's better for us to have specialists in different areas. And so we've specialized into teams. Tyler's the VP of our cybersecurity division. So he runs a team of cybersecurity experts. We don't just rely on our IT people to understand it to the level Tyler and his team do. It's just getting to be too complex and too difficult to manage. So that's kind of who we are and what we do. We're a company of about 240 people now. And about 200 of the people at Executech are technical people with the technical skills and technical background. So, we've got a lot of skill sets, a lot of knowledge, and a lot of experience in all areas of technology. And then this is kind of talks about how our approach is to business. We look at it as we're here to help our clients and support them with their IT needs. IT is a tool that you use to do your jobs. And we kind of understand that. So it's very critical that our tool works, that any of the technology tools you have work so you can get your work done. Therefore, we focus on the end user. We focus on your customers, who you're delivering products and services to, your citizens of your communities, things like that. It really is something that we focus on as far as ingraining in our people as they come on board, because they really need to understand that what we're doing affects that end user, that person that we're trying to deliver products or services to. And we want to just jump in here real quick and talk about who Executech is. Inside of our cybersecurity division, Tyler and his team do a very good job of managing this for our clients. It's an exciting thing to have happen. To have a security team and to have someone like Tyler and Tony involved with us. But we're going to, for the most part, take the attitude of this is kind of a panel discussion. So I'm going to ask Tony and Tyler different questions about cybersecurity. And if you have a question, if you can raise your hand. If you have a question during the presentation, we can do it that way. If you want to just wait till the end to ask your questions, that's fine. I'll see if I can get the chat working in the meantime so that you can put your questions in the chat. All right, so we'll start with the first question. This is for Tyler. And then what are the specific cybersecurity risks and challenges that cities and towns face compared to what other types of organizations face?
Yeah, good question. So the cities and towns have an interesting threat landscape, I would say, because you are required to collect certain pieces of data as well as interact with lots of different parties, both citizens, as well as employees, as well as vendors and partners. And so the challenge of managing all of your data and securing it, it can be a lot. And in particular, cities and towns are very public entities, and that's by their very nature. And they have to make all of their employees' information available, and they have to be very public facing with their appearance, right? And so because of that, they become an easier target a lot of times for attackers. So, if I'm looking to execute an attack and try to get money out of a company, I can get a ton of information about all the, it's usually public record about the employees for a city or municipality, and then I can target the right individuals in order to determine or execute my attack, for example. So we've seen a lot recently of 2 types of attacks that have been unfortunately successful on cities and towns or municipalities. So number 1 being business email compromise that results in fraudulent payments. And the other being successful ransomware attacks. And a lot of these both of these start with the people side of things. A lot of it starts with, in fact, I think in every situation that I have seen where this has occurred, it's started with some sort of social engineering. So a user is sent a fraudulent email either from a partner's compromised account or a spoofed account that appears like it's a partner, gets them to change payment information fraudulently, and then a big payment goes out the door. And by the time they realize it, it's too late, and it's too late to get the funds back. Or someone posing as a citizen, partner, vendor, etc., tricks a user into downloading a piece of software that looks benign. And, sometimes it's for like a support call or something like that for a particular vendor software or something like that. And then a few days later, it launches a ransomware attack. And so like, I don't say those things to be kind of doom and gloom, but unfortunately in reality, we have seen those things. And, that's what we focus on protecting against, and what the data shows are the two most prevalent types of attacks against cities and towns.
You mentioned a little bit, but one of the areas that we've seen a rise in or an increase in is fraudulent payments. Can you kind of go in a little deeper into what that means and what we're seeing from our side? Like, how do those happen? What kinds of things can we do to protect ourselves against stuff like that?
Yeah, for sure. Like I mentioned, the vast majority of those fraudulent payments occur with some sort of social engineering aspect. I mean, that's how the attackers and these criminals make their money, right? And so they get very sophisticated with this. So in one instance that we are aware of, a partner of a municipality was had their account compromised, their email compromised. And so the attacker took control of the partner's email. The partner was a construction company, and the construction company was doing some business with the municipality. And so the attacker actually used the partner's email account, the legitimate email account, to request that payment details be changed. And so the accounting department of the city and AP had no reason to doubt that. It came from a legitimate account. And so because of that, they ended up making that change. And this was a fraudulent payment that went out that was, a lot of money. We're talking 7 figures. So unfortunately, that payment was made. And by the time it was realized, it was too late to get back. And so it's not so much, yes, attackers will try to like spoof email, but in a lot of cases, you can't, cities and towns can't control the security of their partners, nor the security of the citizens, right? And so even if your security is, from a technical standpoint, is locked down, you still have to deal with the trust issue with partners. So in this case, there's several things that could have been done. And what we ended up recommending to this municipality was that they institute a process whereby they positively confirm these types of requests using a known good phone number that they look up separately from any email they get. And so they look up the actual number online, and they find the number to the partner and call and make sure that that was actually a request that was made before they actually change payment details. So there's other things that can be done from a technical standpoint, tuning email filters, et cetera, to prevent this type of attack. But in the end, when there's so much value at risk, we definitely recommend, it seems kind of old school, but we definitely recommend the positive outbound confirmation of that type of a request to change payment information.
Great. Thanks, Tyler. Tony, so I have a question for you. You deal more with the day-to-day cybersecurity situations. You're a security analyst. You're dedicated to helping clients out with their cybersecurity needs. So Tyler mentioned a little bit about what you can do to prevent fraudulent payments. What in general can cities and towns do to help their people or their systems be aware of or watch for these fraudulent or hacks or phishing campaigns?
Great question. The first thing you can do is protecting the way that data is requested and sent out, and then how it's received as well. So whether that is a file system that you're using, making sure that the way that you're sharing that data is locked down, strict to the people who should be getting that information. Another way is securing your storage, whether that is encryption, whether that is putting it into a cloud service and taking advantage of the security that's on those cloud services, say like SharePoint, disposing of paper copies once data has been recorded, and then making sure that those who have access to pertinent or sensitive data in your companies are locked down with permissions, and then those people who have permissions to those files, based on a need to know type of basis, they are also authenticating securely, including things like multi-factor authentication. These are all tools that we use to tighten up security around files and make sure that companies are staying secure. You also mentioned phishing simulations or phishing campaigns. We recommend practicing those phishing campaigns, running your own and testing your users, and then regular security awareness training to make sure that your users are staying cautious. It's pretty easy to get lackadaisical. There are hundreds of thousands of millions of companies around the United States. So your company may not have been attacked, in the last year, but it's important to always stay vigilant, because that's when you're not vigilant, that's when bad things happen.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that. I mean, Tony mentioned the phishing campaigns, and the data shows us that social actions, specifically phishing, is the #1 mechanism for delivering attacks. And because people are imperfect, including myself. Like there's nobody that's perfect. So how do we protect against that, or how do we mitigate that risk? You kind of, one very effective way is shock and awe. And you can do that by catching someone with a phishing email. Because if they get caught in a safe scenario, you better believe that they are going to be much more careful when it's time to be, and just going forward in the future, because they'll say, oh my gosh, not only did I get caught, but everyone knows I got caught. And it's not to shame anybody, and we don't ever recommend any punitive measures like to discipline the employee, but it's all about providing a positive reinforcement of, hey, you need to be careful, because these things can look very legitimate and it's really easy to get caught. So
Tyler, can you go into, or Tony, can either of you go into a little bit more about what phishing campaigns look like, but also what do hackers do? What are some of the ways that they're catching people? At first glance, we might not notice, or, what is it that we kind of miss that if we recognized it would let us know faster that it was a fraudulent person?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So I'll answer first as an attacker. Attackers are constantly looking for new ways that they can, trick someone into clicking a link. And when it comes down to it, it's really a game of numbers. They're going to send out sometimes, and most of the time, hundreds of thousands of emails trying to get a few clicks. And then whoever clicks on it, that's who they can take advantage of. Obviously, there are cases where an email would go to a specific company. In fact, we see that more and more often, where an email will be taken over, just like Tyler had mentioned earlier on. It'll be taken over at a partner, and then they'll use that real email address to phish another company. So those things happen all the time. The better that an attacker can disguise an email as looking legitimate, the better off they are. So we're seeing less and less of these, Nigerian princes, or, hey, it's Michael Jackson, I'm not actually dead. We're not seeing those as much anymore. What we're seeing instead is emails that look like SharePoint, with links that go to real SharePoint files. And the files are where the malicious action can be taken. That leads me to what we do for phishing simulations. We keep an eye out on who is receiving phishing emails, what those emails are looking like, and we will customize emails to either look like what we're seeing out in the wild, so to speak, being received by other clients, other users, or we'll try to customize an email to look like something that your users might see as valuable. So let's say you're using a QuickBooks type tool. We may try to take advantage of or create an email that looks like it's coming from QuickBooks. We might create an email that looks like it's coming from SharePoint, or we might even try an impersonation. So looking like it's coming from your HR or your director of finance or whoever it might be.
So the hackers are going to great lengths to try to mimic an everyday email that companies would send out. What about from the URL or the domain name standpoint? What are they doing with domain names that we may or may not catch?
Great. Yeah, great question. We talk about this in our security awareness training because it's a really tricky move. Often we'll see emails look very, very similar to legitimate domains. So for example, I'll just take the example from our security awareness training. We found and caught an email that went to a company called Rimrock, RIMROCK. But the attacker was trying to look like they were coming from that company, but didn't have access to an email there. So instead, they just bought a domain with two I's, RIIMROCK.com. And that allowed them to nearly make off with quite a lot of money. So, looking close enough is something that we're seeing more and more attackers do as well.
So in that situation, they just bought a domain that looks very similar, so they could send emails from that domain. And that's something that's kind of difficult to catch for the average user, right?
Yeah, I think that's the point, right?
You guys got me on one of ours where I didn't read the email address enough, like I should have. And because I was doing it on my phone. And I think, on your phone, it's a little bit more difficult to see who it's coming from when it boils down to the email address. But yeah, you guys caught me on that one because I didn't pay attention to who it was coming from. So it's very easy to have happen to you. It wasn't the Nigerian prince. I can't remember what you guys did for the email campaign, but it's kind of funny.
Question, John, are you more careful now?
Absolutely. I think we all are when we get caught, right?
Yeah.
I now know to look for email addresses, misspelled, URLs or domain names. So it does make you more conscientious when that happens. So when it comes to regulations and standards, and I don't know, Tyler or Tony, which one of you wants to take this one, but there's some special requirements that cities and towns and municipalities have. Do you want to talk a little bit about those compliance regulations and rules, and then what needs to be in place to meet those standards or meet those regulations?
Yeah, sure thing. So from a compliance perspective, there's kind of like some soft requirements and some harder requirements. So some of the quote unquote harder requirements that we see is when there is a police department for a city. In that type of a situation, there is the CJIS, or Criminal Justice Information System or Information Security standard that is required to be followed. And that is those types of requirements include making sure that the data is protected, and specifically any type of data regarding criminal justice, as well as the systems that are housing that data. So it includes everything from policy and procedure, which we call kind of governance, as well as like background checks, HR type of things, all the way down to the technical settings. And so we have several types of offerings that help address those requirements. Our TDP, or our threat detection and prevention base offering, provides quite a bit of preventative and detective controls that are required by that standard, as well as our TDP MDR, so managed detection and response offering. And then in addition to that, if there's any other things that need to be remediated, are not quite up to par, we offer security consulting for that to make sure everything's kind of buttoned up. So that's really important. And then from a I guess softer requirement side, most entities that are government related will get asked about their compliance with NIST 800-171 at some point. And NIST 800-171 is a set of controls that is developed by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. and it's specifically focused on government and DoD subcontractors, but it's applicable to lots of different government organizations. So we've designed our packages to address a lot of that, as well as we have experience helping clients comply with that standard. So that's usually those are the types of things we see. And it's everything from physical security to which is important, but we see most of the attacks happening digitally. And so everything from preventing and detecting ransomware, like I mentioned, to making sure that you have the right endpoint detection response tools in place, multi-factor authentication implemented, and not just multi-factor authentication, but the right type of multi-factor authentication. So anyways, all of that's part of it.
Great. Tony, so you deal with the day-to-day stuff, like I said before. What are some of the things that relate to compliance that general office staff, so not the IT team, but office people, general administration, what kinds of things do they need to be aware of that deal with compliance?
Typically, it's the best practices. What do they need to do with data? Where do they store their passwords or sensitive client data? Where are files being stored? It could even be how recently were they trained? It's rare to see a compliance statute not require some sort of regular training. Typically, those are the big ones. Those are all things that we cover in our security awareness training, and things that we try to focus on. I mean, if your policies are around the best practices, then in a lot of cases you can avoid some of these maybe legal related issues.
So one area that none of us like to think about, what do I do if I get hacked? What if my city records or an organization's gets hacked and something happens? So you've got the ransomware side of it, and then you have just they gathered all of our data and now they have it. We can't use it because it's stuck in a ransomware situation, or they're threatening to expose private records in a public way. What do you do at that point?
Yeah, it's vital to prepare in some ways for situations like that, assuming that, one day you are going to be attacked, you are going to be breached in some way. And the better you're prepared for when that day comes, the better you can handle a situation like that. Things like backups and regular checking of those backups. And when I say checking, what I mean is doing recovery tests. Once we've backed up all the data, let's do a mock recovery of a file or a folder or a set of files or folders, and let's see how well things go. It's one thing to not have any alerts from your backup software, and another to make sure that it's functioning like you expect it to in an emergency. You may also have situations where you'll need your policies pretty clear, making sure that users know what to do if they, click on a link in an email or they give away information that they should not have. Who are they supposed to call? What are they supposed to do in that situation? And making sure that your users are aware of those things can go a long, long way in shortening the time between an incident and a resolution.
Yeah, and I'll just echo that. The speed from detection to resolution is critical. One, detecting it is critical. And number two, the speed at which you resolve the issue is critical, because the longer an attacker is in your environment or has control, the more damage can be done, including not only to systems and financially potentially, but reputation. And from a reputation standpoint, that's the last thing a city needs, is for its citizens to be questioning city management from an information security perspective. So the detection is a good question. You say, how do you detect it? What is the earliest sign to look for? So there's lots of different things. There's not just a single thing to look for, but there are several things that you can look for. So it depends on the type of attack. I'll defer to Tony real quick, and he can talk about some of the detections that we've put in place for account compromise from an Office 365 account.
Yeah, we really love these alerts. They help us act quickly and know about things before a user might notice. Or for example, one of our, I don't know if most important is the right word, but definitely most triggered is the rule or a mailbox rule changes. So very commonly for an attacker, their goal is to get into a mailbox and then control communication in some way. That could include changing the way or where email is being delivered to, and then marking it as read, maybe going to a folder that most people wouldn't use, and then being able to email back and forth from that folder without the user noticing. Our alerts are put in place to make sure that we know when changes like that happen. And a lot of times those alerts will trigger and we'll go in and say, cool, this is totally legit. The user is organizing their mailbox. And in other times, we see a rule come in and it triggers the incident response. So we can go in and quickly make sure that those are taken care of. This happened literally this week, where our alerts are triggered. We act on those alerts. We can check in and see what was changed, what was done. We can tell that a message or a rule change was malicious, and then we can go in, check the sign-in logs, and see what needs to take place. In this case, it was changing the user password, setting up a more secure form of multi-factor authentication for that user. That includes checking to see if other data was taken or downloaded or stolen from the mailbox or from SharePoint or something like that. And luckily, none of that had been the case, and we had stopped it before any real damage was able to happen. We have other alerts like impossible travel, or we will get, based on email flow, we might see something that triggers some suspicion, emails that don't belong, people being spear-phished, things like that. And those are all things that help us, when it comes down to it, a partner in your security, that helps us act quickly and make sure that the data remains secure.
Yeah, and there's a follow-up question. Do you find that having an easy way to report phishing emails decreases the number of incidents? For example, having a button on an email client toolbar for users. It's a great question. It definitely makes users more aware of phishing emails. And when they do see something suspicious, it just facilitates that reporting. And what we do is we deploy this at our clients. They just get a button in their Outlook client that says report to Executech, and they report it to us, and then we can determine, hey, is this legitimate? Is this a phishing email? And just let the user know. And if it is a phishing email, we can take action on that and make sure it gets blocked, or the email security tools are tools tuned so that it blocks those in the future, that type of thing. Great questions. I'll respond on, we talked about account compromise and like the result of phishing. I'll talk a little bit about ransomware and what we can do to detect that. So unfortunately, ransomware is often difficult to detect, but there are definitely ways to do it. So one of the things that we look for is unusual administrator activity within a domain that often precedes a ransomware attack, whether it's GPOs modified or administrators added that are or users created that are not expected, that type of thing. And we get alerts on those, and then we follow up on those as well. For a more advanced monitoring, we have our TDP MDR solution, where we have a team that's, someone is awake 24/7 and looking for signs of what we call pre-staging activity for an attack. So there are certain things that attackers do, whether it's just running certain commands to discover more about the environment, looking for vulnerabilities or weaknesses before they actually deploy a ransomware attack, for example. And that's what this service is intended for, is to be an advanced method of detecting that and stopping it and getting the bad guys out before a major attack occurs. And thankfully, it's been an incredible tool to do that, and just helps everyone sleep better at night, and including us, when we know that certain team members we have team members that are watching things all the time. Great questions. John, any other questions on your mind?
No, well, no, I was gonna say thanks for those great answers. I appreciate that. I think everyone on the call should. Okay, does anybody else have any questions for these guys? This is your time to pick their brain. All right, I guess so. You guys did such a great job. You answered all their questions, or you just befuddled everybody enough that their minds are just spinning at this point.
Well, I'll just kind of wrap up by saying we are definitely a data-driven operation. So we design our solutions based on data. And Tony can attest to this, that we tune our services based on attacks that are actually happening, and not just on some random, and I shouldn't say random, but not even based on whatever choice of compliance frameworks that you want to follow. Of course, we will check those boxes, but at the end of the day, security is all about risk management. And if you're not focusing on the highest risks, then you're not truly securing your organization. It doesn't matter if you're following a checklist on some sort of compliance standard. If you're not paying attention to the actual risks, you can be compliant and still have terrible security outcomes, including losing money, disruptions, tarnished reputation, etc. So no one cares if you follow your compliance requirements, if those things happen. I mean, they care. I shouldn't say they don't care, but it doesn't prevent the bad things from happening if you're not focusing on the highest risks. So
Great, Tyler and Tony, appreciate your efforts here and sharing information about cybersecurity. Every time I think we've learned enough about cybersecurity, I think we learned that we don't know as much about as we thought. Kind of that the more you know you don't know. Oh, Spencer, you had a question. Are there any free IT safety training resources you recommend that we can show our employees?
Yeah, so I've gone through a few of such trainings. There are some playlists that you can go through that go over basic security, basic IT and security, needs. It is pretty surface level, but it's available, and that can be found on YouTube. You could also find things like CMMC related training from the DoD. That is, gosh, I want to say 15 to 25 minutes. It's been a little while, but the training is free and available on the DoD website.
I would just caution you, especially the stuff you're going to get from the DoD it could be a little bit more technical or dry than your users would like. By all means, search out free options. But you also get what you pay for. So we offer training here at Executech. Obviously, I'm partial to that, but it's definitely the value you get out of it is well worth the cost. It's under $1,000 for a training for the entire company, including recording. So I think we charge just for one-off $600 for that. So if you're interested in that, we're more than happy to help you out with that. If not, no worries. Go find it elsewhere. Just whatever you do, make sure that you are doing that type of training.
All right, I think that we've gotten through all the questions. Thanks everyone for your time. Again, thanks Tony and Tyler for your time. I know you guys are extremely busy, always vigilant in terms of cybersecurity and always trying to fine tune things. So thanks everyone for joining today, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you.